From the chaos of the aftermath of Caesar's assassination, one man ultimately emerged from the pack, and that is Octavian.
It was that line in Shakespeare, some people are born great, others achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them. He had all three.
Octavian is always one step ahead of everybody else.
One of history's best kept secrets was the fact that Octavian was named as heir to his great uncle, Julius Caesar. It was something that absolutely stunned the Roman world when the will was made public. Young man, 18, no experience really in any significant domain. Mark Antony would have been the obvious candidate that everybody would have looked to. He was consul, he was famous, he was rich, he was popular with the people, and he would have been looked to and certainly would have regarded himself as being Caesar's natural heir and the right person to take up the reins of running the Caesarian party.
You're lucky you're breathing! Do you hear me, boy?
Come on!
You're lucky you're breathing!
Animal! You're not fit to leave Rome!
That was really the beginning of the end of their relationship, Octavian and him, because he'd done this thing where he had said that he was going to pay every Roman citizen as per Caesar's will. And to do that, that meant that he had to borrow a phenomenal amount of money that they didn't really have. So that just sent Mark Antony a little bit schizo.
But Antony feels himself being outmaneuvered. He realizes he needs a stronger military base. He starts to try and pull off a little coup of getting himself a new province in which there's already a governor installed. He tries to negotiate with the Senate to get rid of that governor. The Senate won't acquiesce, so he forms an army in Italy and he goes and besieges that governor up at the city of Mutina.
Essentially, the Caesarian party was split by the conflict between Octavian and Antony, and the old Republican Guard saw an opportunity there.
This is the beginning of the end for them.
From your lips to the ears of the gods.
A fool like Antony was sure to blunder. They'll fight among themselves and they'll destroy each other.
Antony was first and foremost a soldier and a man of action. Octavian thought in the long term and saw the way that Roman society was going and saw that he himself could take control of this very unstable, chaotic system and make it work.
The thing about Octavian is that he was an unbelievably astute politician. Just a brilliant genius for understanding other people. Psychologically so acute, knows how to read people, particularly their weaknesses, and use them.
Cicero saw that now was the moment to break the power of the Caesarian party by opening a window for Brutus and Cassius to come back west to Rome.
In Gaul, the renegade Mark Antony has laid siege to the city of Mutina. But salvation is at hand. The Senate sends an army led by the generals Perseus and Pansa. The noble patriot, young Caesar Octavian, joins our generals with his own legions to crush the rebels.
Cicero quite cleverly recruited Octavian and his army to go and do his fighting for him, assuming he would be able to control the boy thereafter.
Octavian tricks Cicero into having him made consul, and therefore he achieves a power beyond what people expected of him, and that's Octavian's great achievement, is always to be underestimated.
My father died on this floor. Right there. Stabbed 27 times, butchered by men he called his friends. Who will tell me that is not murder? Who will tell my legions, who love Caesar as I do, that that is not murder? Who will speak against the motion?
He achieves a kind of political brutality that is the hallmark of his rise to power.
He establishes himself in a position where he can really bargain. He then does a fabulous volte-face because he realizes he's not strong enough to destroy Antony yet. So what he decides to do instead is to make a friend of his enemy.
Antony had to retreat into Cisalpine Gaul, and it was while he was up there in the mountains and he was with his men and a very badly depleted force that Octavian handed out the olive branch to him and said, look, if we're together, we can beat Cassius and Brutus, who have escaped to Greece and have got a number of legions there, but if we pool our resources, we'll have more men, more legions, superior power, and we'll beat them.
So now you've got Antony and Octavian, who really still hate each other, but for the purposes of the now, they've decided to form an alliance. They know it's the only way they're going to beat Brutus and Cassius out. So they come here to Philippi.
What is happening? Do you know?
No idea.
He was very clever in that he knew that he wasn't amazing at each job. He wasn't an amazing tactician or in relation to war. He chose to plead ignorance in relation to things that he knew that he wasn't absolutely 100% on. So what he did was he surrounded himself with experts in each field.
Come on! Follow me!
Where are you going?
When in doubt, attack!
Go.
Thank you. You two, on me!
Ultimately, they do defeat Brutus and Cassius, both of whom are killed in the course of the two battles of Philippi.
With the death of Brutus and Cassius, it was the end of senatorial rule over Rome.
Once the triumvirate gets formed, Antony is the most senior partner. There's one forgotten partner, Lepidus. Never really amounted to much. Then there's Octavian, but Antony's the guy with all the, the bravado and the backing.
Clearly we three cannot all rule together at once. We shall only confuse and contradict each other.
True enough.
We must divide responsibilities.
What are you proposing?
I suggest we divide the territory of Rome into three.
Antony was always eyes east. He wanted to look to the eastern Mediterranean. Good historical reasons for that. The chief reason is that's where the money was.
You should have Rome and the West. And I will make do with Egypt and the eastern provinces. Objections?
Egypt is the place where the grain is grown. It's the great provider of grain for Rome. It's the one commodity that the great power, Rome, cannot do without.
So there's a power struggle going on between the two of them, jockeying for position.
It would be a purely administrative division. All monies would be held in a single treasury.
That would work.
People think they can control him. They think that by forming alliances with him or condoning him in some way, that they're then going to be able to manipulate him and use him as a puppet because he sees as heir and therefore he has a certain status inherently. Whereas actually what happens is that Octavian is always one step ahead of everybody else. So he ends up controlling them.
Octavian thought it would be a very smart idea that if they were going to be allies, then they should be also not only allies politically and militarily, but also in a family way as well. That by Antony marrying Octavia, that locked them all in together.
When and where you are Gaia, I then and there am Gaius.
When and where you are Gaius, I then and there am Gaia.
Octavian always looked out for number one. I think that he always knew that his eyes were on the prize of genuinely succeeding Caesar, of being the new master of Rome in the way that he'd seen Caesar be. And he was prepared to do absolutely whatever it took to achieve that goal.
There is no sense the same feeling of conscience and guilt when you do things for the sake of expediency. You know, I mean, he could do things to people that nowadays, obviously, we couldn't do. But there was not the same emotional repercussions.
He takes it above and beyond the call of duty, his sort of, stands and acts that he does.
You start to really see Octavian's manipulation of the people around him. You see him shut down on his family. You see him start to just place things, you know, like a chess player, like just a great tactician, but actually what he's moving are not pawns, but his mother and his sister. And that takes this extraordinary quality. So he inevitably becomes this rather isolated and lonely figure, because on the way to achieving what he achieves, he alienates all the people who ought to be the people closest to him. And I think, actually, in amidst all Octavian's greatness, there's something rather sad about him.
And he very much saw himself as being the arbitrator and the re-establisher of good Roman Republican morals. He effected a kind of moral revolution, a back-to-basics campaign. He wanted to encourage marriage and to pass laws that were draconian against the commission of adultery.
Octavian felt that Rome was undermined by those vices, and part of his platform was the eradication of vice in Rome.
He was a man who was trying to reinstate old moral virtues.
And he's not committing adultery, but he's having pretty kinky sex.
You should know that when we are married, I shall, on occasion, beat you. With my hand. Or a light whip. When I do so, you must not think you have offended me. I do it because it gives me sexual pleasure.
Antony made all kinds of allegations against Octavian as to his sexual predilections. The most obvious or scurrilous one is that the reason that he had been preferred by Caesar was that he granted Caesar sexual favors when he was a young boy. I suspect the charges that were laid against him probably spring from jealousy as much as anything else. However, he did play the field, and that anybody who's looking back is going to say, well, hold on a second, that does seem to be completely at variance with what he effected, which was a kind of moral revolution. He was also one for taking other people's wives and not really preserving the niceties when he did so.
How would you like to be married to me?
I would like that. If my husband does not object.
What is his name?
Claudius Nero.
I know the family. They're good, patriotic people. They will not say no to a divorce.
Oh, I'm sure not, sir.
Excellent.
Octavian starts to inhabit his role as ruler of Rome, not just the conurbation of Rome, but the whole of the west of the Roman Empire.
You shall leave this city.
Leave this city?
You shall go east to your provinces, and you shall not come back.
Or else what, boy?
You shall leave this city, or I will declare our alliance is broken. I shall have this sad story told in the Forum. I will have it posted in every city in Italy. And you know, the people are not so liberal with their wives as you are. They will say you wear cuckold's horns. They will say your wife betrayed you with a low-born pleb on my staff. You will be a figure of fun. The proles will laugh at you in the street. Your soldiers will mock you behind your back.
Antony is persuaded to go to Alexandria, and he basically starts to play both sides against the mill.
Rome at this period is going through a pretty rough time. There is a grain shortage, a huge grain shortage. Mark Antony has decided to withhold the shipments of grain for Rome. And this is having a huge effect on the populace, as you can imagine. Rationing, starvation. It was a pretty bleak time.
Antony's holding the grain back because he wants Octavian to declare war on him.
Well, that doesn't make the little shit declare war. I don't know what will.
But he doesn't want to have to declare war on Octavian. He wants Octavian to do the dirty.
Whereas if Octavian did that, Mark Antony was still popular with the people. He would be doing the anti-popular thing. So the politics were involved as well. So it was a very sort of touchy time.
A delegation from Rome has arrived because Rome is starving. They don't have the grain to feed their people because Egypt was the breadbasket, really, of this area of the Mediterranean, so we would supply with them with the grain.
I've been ordered by Triumvir Mark Antony to escort you both back to your ship. I'm to make sure that you leave Alexandria as soon as the wind allows.
Without seeing him?
He turns away the mother of his child.
That's correct.
When Antony rekindles the relationship with Cleopatra, already married, Octavia is openly humiliated.
Romans were very xenophobic people. His refusal to reconcile with his wife was used by Octavian as propaganda. He's no longer a real Roman, he's become Egyptian.
Octavian's response is simply to use his by then extremely formidable propaganda machine to step up the war against Antony.
This was something that people could understand. He's divorced his wife, he's divorced his decent Roman wife and is shacked up with a crazy Egyptian witch.
The most brilliant example of Antony propaganda would be Virgil in the Aeneid. He captures that whole sense of this weird world. It's bizarre and dark and voluptuous and sensual and dangerous and explicit and quintessentially un-Roman.
We may weep for him, but then we must do our duty, for he is no longer a Roman, but an Egyptian. And what is left for us to do but fight him and destroy him?
After Antony and Cleopatra defeated Actium, they retreated to Alexandria. Essentially, at that point, they knew it was only a matter of time before Octavian and his armies converged on Alexandria. So it was essentially a last stand of these amazing, grand people with a vast army outside waiting to come in and get them.
A siege, then. I'll inform the engineers.
Even a madman could hold that palace for weeks. Months.
Burn it down, then.
We need to keep the Egyptian people quiet. I suspect destroying the royal palace with their queen inside might make them rather peevish.
What then?
Agrippa was absolutely Octavian's go-to guy. He drew up the inventory that gave Octavian overwhelming force at Actium.
Sea battles was his forte, and when it came to them, he just looked at ways of attacking people that had never been thought of before, and people were so unique that they caught everyone off guard. And I think that he just thought outside the box, and that's why he was Octavian's right-hand man when it came to fighting any battle, because he knew that this one guy's going to get it done. It's going to be him.
The Octavian machine is closing in, coming to the palace, demanding Antony. And there are various stories of how Antony killed himself, but the point being that he gets it first, and obviously she survives him.
Octavian has expressed his desire that he might let Cleopatra and her family live, i.e. her children by Antony, but she has a son by Caesar, Caesarion, who he's determined to kill, because you can't have a son of Caesar roaming around who would be in direct lineage to the premier citizenship of Rome.
Cleopatra believes she can do Octavian as she did Antony and Caesar. She can seduce him too. She miscalculates. She can't. And as soon as she realizes that and meeting him, then she knows the jig is up and she takes her own life.
Democracy versus tyranny was the big question confronting the Romans. Is it better that everyone has a voice but there's chaos, or is it better that one man tyrannizes over everyone else but there is peace and order? Octavian solved the question by creating a system in which there was the appearance of democracy, but he ran it as a one-man show.
I think that the reason that Augustus ultimately was able to prevail against the Senate is that everybody knew that the old order was exhausted. And the Romans were very pragmatic about these things. If something was tried and you worked with it and it failed, then you jettison it.
His genius was to find a way of squaring the circle and ending the political conflict and creating what was essentially the longest period of peace and stability the Rome had ever known and would ever know.
With the wealth of Egypt coming back in, with the grain from Egypt coming back in, with there no need to raise armies, with there no internecine civil strife, everything starts to come back to life for Rome, both Rome the city, Italy and the Roman world. There's fabulous building going on. Rome starts to convert and transform itself architecturally. Augustus later, in the work that he wrote at the end of his life, made the famous boast that I found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble.
Augustus's achievements were greater than anybody else's. He did more amazing things than anybody else. He did rather practical things like reorganising the sewers of Rome and everything you see in the Forum in Rome. All these wonderful legacies he left to Rome.